Welcome to SVCH Talks, where innovation meets inspiration and every conversation sparks transformation. Here we unlock the future, share cutting-edge insights, and empower you to lead the way in a world driven by knowledge and discovery. Let's elevate together, because the next breakthrough starts here.
We're thrilled to have you join us for a day filled with insightful discussions, groundbreaking innovation, and transformative learning. Today, you'll have the unique opportunity to hear from industry leaders as they share their expertise, experiences, and best practices. Before we move forward, remember that you can obtain the micro-credential for this event. Just follow the instructions on our website. Don't miss this chance to certify your participation and learning. Now we're ready to start. Let's dive into the broadcast that our team has prepared for you. Enjoy it.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to this amazing and exciting conversation because we will talk about AI strategy, data architecture. So it will be really amazing. And we have one of the experts, one of the bright minds to talk about it. So with us, we have Michael Kravik. How are you, Michael? How's everything
Doing
going?
well. Thank you for having me here. I'm really excited to have this talk.
Really excited. So for those who haven't heard about Michael, first you have to follow him on LinkedIn and also Blue Yeti because he's co-founder and chief strategy officer at Blue Yeti, with a background shaped at the big techs such as Tableau, Snowflakes, Atlan, among others. And he specializes in data strategy, modern data architectures, and preparing organizations to scale AI on strong data foundations. So he's Michael. Maybe if you can tell us a little bit of Blue Yeti, what do you do, and
Sure.
so far so people can have more idea.
Yeah. Thanks for that. So Blue Yeti is a center of excellence in the modern data stack. What we focus on is business value for your data analytics and for your customers. We focus from a technology perspective. It is all focused around Snowflake. And then that larger circle winds up being Domo, which is a full stack solution. For those of you that have followed Domo over the past 10 years, they've had an incredible evolutionary path. And now they have everything from data connectivity to agentic AI workloads. So a great one-stop shop. And our focus, what we say is no ego, no drama. From being in the industry, I've been in venture-backed analytics for about 20 years. So the three companies that Alejandro had mentioned and a whole bunch more, realized that sometimes we need to stick to the goal and we need to stick to basics. And those foundational concepts are sometimes very hard to overcome, which is going to fold into our following conversation when we talk about AI readiness. But what our core practices are: data governance, analytics through Snowflake and Domo, as well as agentic AI. And we have really a portfolio of companies that we work with. And then also getting back to the data governance side, we're heavier on the practice, but also we have some great relationships with some data governance platforms as well. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Amazing. So actually, we met in the Snowflake Summit here in San Francisco. We had a great conversation. I love to have this moment to talk more about it and to follow like some discussion. So I remember that we were talking about leapfrogging. So what you argued is that organizations cannot leapfrog data challenges by jumping straight to Gen AI. So why is that such a dangerous misconception?
Sure. Let's start with why it's so attractive first. And it really comes down to it's a lot easier to divert budget from your traditional data strategy going over to agentic AI, Gen AI, or any of the newer LLM based AI projects. What that winds up meaning is you're really leapfrogging over executing on your data strategy. Uh, Now, let's take one step back and talk a little bit about what leapfrogging is. And generally, leapfrogging is when you're doing this leap forward in technological advancement, and because of the advancement has been so great, you're actually skipping over a previous advance that had occurred. And I'll give you two quick examples. The first one is generic, and it's based upon mobile phones and telephones. So in a lot of the developing world, they did not have the benefit of real telephone landline infrastructure for telephony, and incomes mobile phones, and putting in cell towers, and probably solar powered cell towers, putting them all over the place was very easy. And then these countries were able to just go fully mobile through their environment and their culture. So mobile banking, mobile transactions, things of that nature, without having to deal with all of the middle advancements of landlines. Another example is a little more recent, and in the enterprise as well, is companies that have gone from maybe Excel, Access databases, MySQL, and then going straight over to the big data era by going to a cloud data platform, say something like Snowflake. They've missed all of the advances in the middle that were very expensive, say like Teradata, or some of them that were less expensive but high in risk and high in maintenance costs, like Hadoop, and that enabled them to advance kind of doubly beyond what other companies did. And let's talk about what's required and able to have a successful leapfrogging. And really, the first thing is you have a limited infrastructure lock-in. So in the example of the cell phones, you don't need landlines at all to use a mobile phone. Another one is a complete foundational replacement, which again points to that kind of same point that I had mentioned before. And there's minimal dependence on the existing quality of what you're working with. And in the case of AI, it really violates all three of these concepts. First is the enterprise data, and really the data estate is very deeply interconnected. Organizations can't simply abandon existing data systems, existing data stores, because they're based on transactional systems and ODSs and some things that may be very old, but they're highly performant and they still work. AI also really enhances, it doesn't replace any existing data foundations. So it builds upon the existing data infrastructure and metadata management that you already have or don't have. And then lastly, AI amplifies any kind of data quality issues. It's really an enhancer and an accelerator, not a replacer. So if you have poor data, you have bad data metadata management, then you're going to have future problems. And that's where things like incorrect answers, hallucinations, mistakes, lack of context comes in.
Perfect. So yeah, totally agree. Like without the right data management, you will have a lot of hallucinations and a lot of problems with AI and with the solutions in the companies. And going more into data governance, which is one of the key areas at Blue Yeti. Well, it has been always really important, but how the rise of AI change the stakes and the required practices?
Sure. So data governance has generally been a nice to have as opposed to a must have, despite whatever I may say. Kind of the funny thing is, I've been saying it's the year of data governance, and I think I've been saying that since about 2019. 2025, 2026, it may finally be right. So I'll take that as a win. But data governance in the past really had a different meaning. It was generally an effort that was only worth it if you were highly regulated. So maybe for health data, financial data, personal data, and you needed to manage and have checks and balances on how private data was managed, identified, and how it was stored and retained. Along with that, you needed to have technical metadata, so things like definitions, catalogs, glossaries, and lineage, which really now winds up being more of a foundational data governance. And this is where I think data governance needs to go and needs to be for really all organizations that are taking data seriously. And what all that does is provides a system of record, for a lack of a better term, of how data is being used, how your terms are being defined, and how those terms relate to data. This seems like it's something that's trivial, but once you start digging into it, you realize how deep and how complex it can get. And every company has at least one of these scenarios. It's normally number of customers, revenue, labor hours, or things that have been manufactured. Depending upon what team you're talking to, their definitions can not be completely congruent. So what that will do is reports won't match up. People will start miscommunicating. People will start making incorrect decisions based on defective data. And since they're almost right, it's very hard to detect those. From there, data governance really needs to have things like quality monitoring and also more of a cultural oversight, where people need to be serious about working with data in order to use it properly and take it seriously. So if governed data and data governance is not part of everyone's day-to-day working in their office and in their enterprise, it's really never going to stick, because it winds up being an effort that they think someone else is going to take care of. Really, it winds up being, it's like a topic of safety. You can have safety rules, you can have safety checklists, but unless everyone's using them and everyone's talking about them, you're not going to have a safe environment.
Yeah, makes sense. Like, for having a safe environment, we need for sure checks and balances, having all the technical metadata correct. Like, everything is so important if we want to deploy with AI.
And and sorry to interrupt there, there's a couple of other things too. So that's really the foundational data governance. Now let's bring in AI. And there's two pieces that now become even more important than it was previously. And first is automation, because data is moving so fast, data is changing so fast. So having any kind of capabilities for making sure you're tying together context from different types of data is important. And one of the things that typically sits at the foundation of that is knowledge graphs. Catalogs and glossaries were generally finding my stuff. What does my stuff mean? And that was a byproduct of the self-service analytics age, because everyone was making a whole bunch of content, and it was difficult for people to understand where it was and kind of what what do these charts mean and what do these analyses mean? But now it winds up being a little more sophisticated because you're taking pieces of data from all over the place. And the LLMs are able to start drawing inferences from all these different pieces. And you need to inject your tribal knowledge of what is happening with the data and how the data relates to each other, and also what's in the dimensions and measures and how they relate to each other. And unless you can codify that somehow, you're still going to wind up lacking something when it comes to the quality of the output of your AI initiatives. And that's really, again, comes down to context. And context is something that can be defined. Typically it's relational, and that's why knowledge graphs and graph DBs are so important in this day and age for driving through data and getting better meaning out of it.
I love that part of knowledge graphs and the automation of, because in my mind, like, all companies are divided in teams, and every team are having their own insights and their own best practices and all that. But sometimes it's really difficult to interact and communicate and to, lever from other teams' insights and so on.
Yeah, and there's that's going to happen naturally from team to team. So let's say sales to customer success to engineering or marketing, they're all going to have different aspects of the same type of dimensions and same type of measures. Now add on top of that the complexity of M&A. So there are many large enterprises that have been created by a lot of purchases and a lot of mergers and acquisitions. Those back-end systems don't instantly mind meld together and turn into one database. Often cases they stay separate for a very, very long time. So then how do you really broker the difference in definitions? When is it important to bring them together? When is it important just to leave them as is? All of those decisions need to be made. They need to be culturally communicated. They need to be understood by all of the teams, so that when they are pulling data from different sources, or maybe comparing two different sources, they're able to come up with really accurate results. And again, it all comes down to context, and it's what AI has done with the general human in the loop concept is, well, the human was always in the loop, especially when you were looking in the previous 10 years of the days of self-service analytics. We were doing analyses with really bad data, not very high quality. It was the best that you can get. At that point in time, it was better than nothing, but you were able to look at it and iteratively make assumptions and test hypotheses and come up with a very robust analysis. But you were involved in every incremental step of the way. With AI, the whole point of it is cutting out some of those incremental steps, especially if they are they're mindful but taxing and kind of tedious. Those are the things that AI really does well with. And there's a lot of mistakes that can occur in those loops if you don't have the proper context programmed into the LLM. Or at least make it aware of the LLM needs to be aware of the context.
Totally. Context is everything to understand all the data behind and all that.
Exactly.
Good. By the way, to everybody who's watching us, feel free to ask any comments in YouTube, LinkedIn, or Meta platforms. We can have time during the conversation to talk about it. But following on the promises of AI, so organizations actually vary in their readiness. So how should enterprises tailor their AI strategies to their place on the analytics maturity curve? How do you see that?
Do we have another hour or two to talk about this one? So
A little bit less, but let's.
this is an interesting one. It does come down to really analytical maturity. Um, if you go on LinkedIn, you go on the internet, there are tons of different models. Gartner has one, that's kind of awareness, reactive, proactive, blah, blah, blah. It comes down to a couple of factors, and not all of it is technology. First is you need to have the infrastructure, sure. So unless you have fast data, like a fast database, a analytical platform, so say traditional BI in one sense or another, some data science, some machine learning, some LLM based AI. That's all really important, but that's kind of the nuts and bolts of the system. The second part is, do you have the processes and the processes to manage all of that? And that's largely going to be some form of data governance, and then maybe a little bit that goes around that. Is the data of decent quality? Are you aware of how often this data is getting updated? Are you doing sales analytics, and are you working off of today's data, last week's data, last month's data? Then the last one is cultural. Where do people value using data? And I'll give you a really good example of, just kind of as an aside, I'm a big movie buff. I'm one of those types of people that opens up IMDb, which is the Internet Movie Database. For those of you not aware, it shows you what TV show, what movie, and it even has video games now, who starred in it, who directed it, and also a whole bunch of other information. Some people are okay not referencing material, and they're happy with arguing, was Meryl Streep or was that Angelica Houston in this one movie? And they can have a great conversation about arguing who was right. And lo and behold, it could have been Joan Cusack. Who knows? Other people like myself, I would just open up IMDb, figure it out. And now we know who that person is. And then also there's a lot of other essentially metadata about that movie or TV show that you can start to discuss and enhance your conversation and go farther than you were before. Higher maturity or higher analytical maturity companies really have people that are in that latter category that would prefer to have some sort of reference data that's going to be an anchor point of their conversation or their data or their decisions. Now, how do you determine that? Is really through maturity assessments, the infrastructure part, kind of your enterprise architecture part, is the easy part of the conversation. Then the next part is looking at data governance. And for example, Blue Yeti does a data governance assessment that is a kind of a fixed time process where we go through and try to get an idea of where you are on all of the factors that speak toward better data governance. And then the last one is really more on the enablement side, having people understand how to use analytics better, and also making sure that the enterprise has guidance of making sure that they do use data. When you're having conversations about performance of a department, are you showing a BI report of what the performance was? So you're quantitatively speaking through things, or are you sitting there still arguing about qualitative items and things of that nature? And you can't have that conversation without having trust in your data, which drives through data governance. And you can't have good data governance that actually works without having a robust enterprise or a robust modern data stack, or let's just say data stack. So all of those tie in together. From there, it comes down to, well, what are you going to do with AI? And that's where you need to be, first off, self-aware of where you are in your analytical maturity. And then that'll determine how well you're able to crawl, walk, run, because this is really not only a learning experience, but also evolutionary when it comes to what the people in the process wind up doing. And then beyond that, of course, the technology is going to come into play when you're deploying an AI system. But doing a crawl when you're starting out, this is going to wind up being, typically it's going to wind up being partially experimental, maybe partially business value adding, where the important thing is really learning what you've achieved. So maybe what's worked or what hasn't worked, which will enable you to start taking some of these smaller use cases that are going to provide incremental business value. From there, you start getting your sea legs and you're able to drive toward more ambitious goals of AI. And some of them could potentially just move the entire business forward. A good example of a framework for this, Sol Rashidi had written a book about 2 years ago, your AI, sitting right here, your AI survival guide. And she speaks to a criticality complexity matrix. So it's not just the low-hanging fruit that are the valuable ones. Some of them may not be at all, but you're looking for the highly critical use cases that aren't very complex. And those are going to be the good ones to start going after when you're in the walk phase. Because the crawl phase, you need to be able to know what you're able to achieve so that you can right size your use cases when you're going through that criticality versus complexity matrix. And this is a really important part because there's two ways this can go. If you overshoot, the project's going to fail. And many companies, or I should say, many thought leaders have had examples of what is 85% of all AI projects have failed. What they neglect to say is how many of them were experiments, and failure is not a bad thing in an experiment. It's an opportunity for learning. On the other side is if you undershoot and you're a little too modest with your use case, you're going to leave money on the table. It's not going to get the value, and you're not going to get you're not going to earn the budget to be able to move forward. So it really comes down to driving to right-sized use cases.
Really.
Yeah, it looks like we got some comments here too. I'm just trying to read through them.
Yeah. Actually, it's from another platform that I couldn't show. So it's here, but it's from Patrick Spencer. He is KiteWorks SVP from Americas Marketing, and he asked, data foundations fail when security and compliance aren't architectured from day one. 15 years plus experience in cybersecurity shows me that data governance isn't just about quality. It's about creating trusted, defensible AI systems that won't become tomorrow's breach headlines.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I'll even add with cybersecurity, a lot of the focus is on the perimeter, still leaving that soft center of a company. And in this day and age, bad actors or well-meaning actors that just made a mistake can either leave data in a spot that can be accessed with the cloud, and that also all comes into play of trust. Who would want to touch something that is considered a third rail, like dangerous data? So being able to, and that's all part of data governance as well. So Patrick, don't mistake my statement by saying that was a complete statement of data governance. There's really this foundational part which drives toward just intrinsic trust of the data itself. And then you wind up having environmental controls that need to be in place as far as security. That generally was more of a traditional data governance consideration only when it was sensitive data, say somebody's name or financial information. But this day and age, you can take a lot of mundane data, bring it together, and do some very interesting things, which may not be to a company or a person's benefit. So yes, I consider all data sensitive. It just drives it. Really, the important thing to figure out is, well, how much protection are you going to apply to it? But thanks for that. Thanks for that comment, Patrick.
Perfect. Perfect. So let's go with another question. So if tomorrow you had to build an AI mid-sized company from zero, where would you start and what would you not buy first?
Well, I wouldn't buy an LLM first. I would really start with starting talking about data strategy. What are you looking to achieve? That is, that's a data strategy question. And from there, it, that waterfalls down to what kind of data do you need to achieve this? And what are those data definitions? These should be very easy questions to answer. A lot of times just codifying it is important enough so that now you know that you can get the data that you're looking for. There's many a data project, and this does not have to be AI, that fails because they misunderstood. They wanted to get this measure or this dimension, and then they realized that the system that they purchased could not provide that, or it didn't provide it in the granular fashion that they wanted, or something of that effect. So really having that foundation set is important to get from day one. It does suggest a boil the ocean methodology for data governance, but I would position it as there are ways to go about this that are not going to boil the ocean. And a colleague of mine, Juan Cicada, gave me this really great analogies over at ServiceNow, where it's like top of the elevator, bottom of the elevator. Where you go to the top of the elevator, you're talking to the executive leadership. What are the key things for success? And they can give you some KPIs, some numbers, and maybe it's sales, maybe it's revenue, maybe it's customer retention. And all of those start driving toward data when you go down to the bottom floor. You go to the bottom floor where all the data engineers are and all those base systems. And it seems like it can be immensely wide of what you're looking for. But having those KPIs is something that can really narrow down your focus of what you should be striving for when it comes to governed data. And then you go to the middle and then you start going to the different departments. And there you can start ferreting out all of the differences that KPI means to the different departments. So now you have something that is not only accurate, not only moves the business forward because that's where the leadership is looking to drive the company, but also something that's actionable for all of the different departments too. So it really, if you can kind of consider two cones coming together, it winds up narrowing that scope and you're not boiling the ocean. That winds up being step one. And step two and subsequent steps wind up being, you can widen that cone by saying, okay, what's next? What's the next problem? The great thing about a successful KPI is that you need to change it after a while because you've succeeded in moving that KPI. Or maybe that turns into a KPI that you just pay attention to occasionally, just because you now have the processes and the people that know how to keep it in control. Hopefully that answered your question well enough. Anything you want to follow up on a question on that, or any comments?
Not really. I think it totally makes sense. I just want to maybe a following question, like how do you see about this successful KPI? Like sometimes it's difficult for companies to find like that North Star metric. And how do you see that? What's, for example, for AI, this KPI that maybe executives or companies should think about?
That's a good one. So make sure I have you correct. Just a KPI that measures the success of an AI initiative.
Yeah.
It really, It depends on the type of AI use case that you are trying to achieve. So some AI use cases are um, give me something faster. So maybe like writing an article or something like that. I'm trying to come up with a quick example. So speed would be your KPI. Some are accuracy, because doing an accurate job requires a lot of due diligence of, let's say, comparing 100 contracts to each other, which is takes some skill, but is also mind numbing at the same time. So then accuracy would really wind up being the KPI. Lastly, some AI initiatives are doing things like looking for new markets, finding new market segments, um, testing marketing for marketing segments, and then you can start using a little more traditional type of KPIs that are just measuring the old to the new and seeing, are you getting a better conversion rate because of an AI based targeted marketing campaign. So I don't think there's really any magic in it. It still comes down to fundamentals and not turning your brain off. Just because AI comes into play doesn't mean you can stop thinking. You need to look at the results, make sure that it's correct. There are going to be, people talk about hallucinations a lot. How much of that is actually preventable by maybe doing a reprompting? Some of the things, just from my own personal experience using Claude, Perplexity, ChatGPT, for anything other than a trivial question, I'm prompting at least 5 times on the same topic. And I'm getting closer and closer and closer. Sometimes I need to go and verify some of the things that I'm getting back as a result. But this is still a highly iterative process. It is not hands off.
Really, really great. And I love this concept of old versus new, because we need to also set like those standards, right? Like to have, it's not like just like, okay, did well just this task, or I saved this amount of money, but overall, what's compare the baseline, which is like all the past operations and results versus all what is achieving with these new tools.
Yeah, and we're comparing, we're comparing processes where people make mistakes to AI where AI makes mistakes. So what does success mean?
Yeah.
And I think probably the most extreme example of that is with autonomous cars. There's a lot of car accidents, and the car accidents that occur with AI are tragic, just as tragic as ones caused by humans or by mistakes or people being tired or impaired in one way or another. But how do you measure success there? And that's a really tough question. And I hope you're not going to ask me to answer that, because I really don't I really don't want to. But that's if you really look at what we're trying to measure when it comes to success, is something that is difficult to measure even before AI. So we don't really have a solid baseline.
Makes sense. I love how all the conversation is going with AI, because it involves like a lot of things, like a change in operations, even like in ethics, like a lot of things are going on. But that's why your insights or inputs are so relevant.
Thank you.
So let's go with the last question. What do you think?
Sure.
So let's see what this one. 10 years from now, what will differentiate companies that win with AI from those who disappear?
I think the thing that it's going to wind up being is companies that use AI to accelerate. So they're going to keep the people they have, or make sure that they have AI savvy people and use that to go faster, better, higher quality, and broader, as opposed to companies that are treating AI like and their employees like a cost center and just looking to reduce costs. Because all it takes is a couple of companies to say, I'm going to take AI, I'm going to use the team that I have to go faster and farther. And those are the ones that are going to succeed. I think outside of a few cottage industries that may be more craftsmanship based than anything else, those may be put aside, but those that don't adopt AI are going to be really challenged. We're seeing it from the past 10, 20 years with companies that are data driven versus those that aren't. And the ones that aren't are wind up being challenged with profitability. There was one customer that I was speaking to. They're in the retail space, and they wanted to be data driven. And this is back when I was at Snowflake. We're looking at replacing their Netezza database with Snowflake. And one of the advantages of Snowflake was essentially unlimited amount of storage, because you're putting in an S3 and it's completely elastic. You just keep adding in it. It never says my disk is full. And it was a foreign concept to them. I kind of drilled in and asked why, and well, what do you do with your database now when you have too much data? And they said, we just start deleting some of it. So they're constantly hamstringing themselves with a fixed set size of data, preventing them from getting deeper analysis from time trends that go longer, or maybe more granular data. They never really explained to me how they cut down their data, but having that type of mindset where you're just going to kind of cut things to fit inside, fit in a certain size, is going to be very limiting for companies going in the future.
Amazing. So good. Any last recommendation or comment for executives, for founders that are listening to us, like how to prepare for the future and AI?
Yeah, I would say again that it's possibly the year of data governance, which is great, but the important thing is to find out what data governance means to you, to your organization. And it can wind up being cybersecurity, data protection, like Patrick was mentioning, but it's definitely going to wind up being things like definitions of data, data quality, data freshness, and defining what they are, because a lot of the data governance vendors and the ecosystem in general has not been very good at explaining what the differences are and what's needed. They just tell you that you need what they are selling. And it's incumbent upon the leaders of companies to determine what's important for them, so that they know that they're bringing together not only data governance technologies, but really data governance processes and culture within your organization. And that's really the thing that needs to come first.
Amazing, Michael. So thank you so much for this great conversation, for sharing all your insights, all your experience in this super hot topic nowadays. So I'm really appreciate your time to share with the audience. And where do they can find you, or Blue Yeti, or you?
Yeah, thanks for that. Find me on LinkedIn. I think I'm one of two Michael Kravix. So pretty easy to find. And our website is blueyeti.us. So that's also really easy to find. And feel free to follow us on LinkedIn. So if you go on to LinkedIn and look for Blue Yeti, you'll find us there and follow us. And if you have any questions, feel free to hit the make an appointment button that's on my profile.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Michael. Thank you to all the team of Blue Yeti and to all the audience. Thank you so much. If you have
Alejandro, it was a
following
pleasure.
questions.
It was a pleasure. Hope to run into you again very soon. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye bye.